Dawn. It's breaking over a small town in southern France. The year is 1320. You're a baker. You've lived here your whole life. You know everyone. Everyone knows you. And right now, you're about to watch your neighbor burned alive. You hear them before you see them. Hooves on cobblestones. Clop, clop, clop. Two men in black robes, Dominican friars. Behind them, men with swords. They ride into the town square, where a wooden stage has been set up, and you know, everyone knows what that stage is for. The friars make their announcement. There is heresy here. A diabolic spirit has crept among you. For 3 days, they'll hear confessions. After that, darker. They'll start asking questions, and if they don't like your answers, in the whisper, that wooden stage, it becomes a pyre. Here's what's insane about this story. Your neighbor they're about to burn, she didn't worship Satan, she didn't practice black magic, she didn't do anything we'd recognize as a crime. She just believed the wrong things at the wrong time, in the wrong place. And here's what's really insane. The people who lit that fire, they weren't monsters. They were trying to save souls. They genuinely believed they were doing God's work. The Inquisition isn't a story about evil people doing evil things. It's something way more terrifying than that. It's a story about how ordinary legal procedures, intellectual ideas, and good intentions can combine to create hell on earth. And if you think this is just medieval history, pause. By the end of this, you're going to see this pattern everywhere.
Let me tell you about Marguerite Porete. Paris, 1310. Marguerite is what they called a beguine, a religious woman living outside the official church structures. She's devoted her life to God. She's written a book about her spiritual experiences. It's called The Mirror of Simple Souls. And Marguerite is careful. She knows the church is touchy about women claiming direct spiritual authority, so she consults with church authorities about her book. She wants to make sure she's on solid ground. But someone, we don't know who, doesn't like what she's written. Maybe it's a rival. Maybe it's just an official having a bad day. Marguerite is arrested, tried for heresy. And here's what they accuse her of. Claiming that a soul united with God doesn't need the church anymore, that the pure soul transcends the need for institutions, for priests, for sacraments. Now, is that heresy, or is that just mysticism? Depends on who you ask. Depends on what year you ask. The court decides heresy. On June 1st, 1310, in the Place de Grève in Paris, Marguerite Porete is burned at the stake. She dies in front of a crowd, screaming, because that's what happens when you burn to death. You don't just peacefully expire. Your fat renders, your skin splits. You scream. Now here's the part that'll make you angry. After Marguerite dies, her book, The Mirror of Simple Souls, it circulates widely, anonymously, and people love it. It's copied and recopied, translated into multiple languages. In 1327, just 17 years after they burned Marguerite, a cardinal approves it. In 1410, a full century later, Pope Eugenius IV officially endorses it, calls it a work of profound spirituality. The exact same book that got her burned alive. So, was Marguerite a heretic? She was in 1310, she wasn't in 1410. What changed? Not the book, not the ideas. The context changed. The people judging her changed. And this is what you need to understand about the Inquisition, about heresy, about witch hunts, about all of this. Heresy is in the eye of the beholder. Without someone to define orthodoxy, correct belief, there is no heresy, no crime, no punishment. Think about that. Think about how many beliefs you hold right now that could get you fired, canceled, or worse, depending on who's doing the judging. Think about how the same opinion can make you a hero to one group and a monster to another. The medieval church didn't invent this dynamic, they just perfected it. But Marguerite's story is just one woman, one execution. To understand the scale of what we're talking about, we need to talk about a professor in Prague who started a revolution. Jan Hus. He's a rock star preacher at the University of Prague, huge crowds, massive influence, and Huss is saying some radical things. The Bible should be translated so regular people can read it. Priests should give up their excessive wealth. The Pope isn't infallible. Maybe, you don't need an institutional church to have a relationship with God. Sound familiar? It should. These are basically Protestant ideas, 100 years before the Protestant Reformation. The church summons Huss to the Council of Constance. They promise him safe conduct. He goes, they try him, find him guilty. And on July 6, 1415, they burn Jan Hus at the stake. Bohemia explodes. Huss's followers, calling themselves Hussites, rebel. In 1419, they throw the king's representatives out of the window, the first defenestration of Prague. The Bohemians really enjoyed throwing people out of windows. It becomes kind of their thing.
Pop quiz. When did witch hunting peak in Europe? If you said the Middle Ages, you're wrong. Witch hunting peaked between 1580 and 1630. The Renaissance, the age of Shakespeare, Galileo, and the scientific revolution. The last person executed for witchcraft in Europe? 1782. That's after the American Revolution, after Beethoven was born, after the Enlightenment. Let that sink in. So what the hell happened? Okay, in the medieval world, magic was everywhere, and I mean everywhere. It was as common as, checking your phone is today. You wanted a good harvest? Make an offering at a saint's shrine, or cast a little spell. Same difference, really. The line between religion and magic was thin. Around 1320, an inquisitor named Bernard Guy wrote a manual for other inquisitors. In it, he describes all kinds of magic, love spells, fortune-telling, charms to find lost objects. Here's the crazy part. Guy prosecuted over 1,000 cases in his career. Exactly zero were for sorcery or witchcraft. So when did everyday magic become witchcraft? When did it become a crime worth burning someone over? Between 1430 and 1442, 5 men created the concept of the witch as we know it. An inquisitor, a theologian, a judge, a town chronicler, a poet. Operating independently but in the same region, the Alps, basically Switzerland and northern Italy, they built a picture of a terrifying new threat, an organized conspiracy of devil worshippers. These weren't just people doing harmful magic. These were people who had renounced Christianity, who trampled on the cross, who flew through the night to attend Sabbaths where they worshipped Satan himself. At these Sabbaths, they killed babies, ate human flesh, had orgies, made potions from corpses. And, this is key, women were at the center of it. Why women? Well, according to these guys, women were more susceptible to demonic influence, more lustful, more easily corrupted, weaker-minded. Totally not misogyny, definitely just objective theological observation. If this all sounds familiar, the flying, the Sabbaths, the baby killing, it should. This is where our image of witches comes from, not from folklore, from these 5 men in the 1430s. Before 1430, if your neighbor was a witch, it meant she maybe cursed your cow or gave your kid a fever. After 1440, if your neighbor was a witch, it meant she was part of a satanic conspiracy to destroy Christian civilization. See the difference? One is a personal grudge. The other is an existential threat.
But the real turning point, the moment this became industrialized murder, a book called the Malleus Maleficarum, the Hammer of Witches. Written by Heinrich Kramer, a Dominican inquisitor, and by all accounts, kind of a creep. Kramer had been prosecuting a woman named Helena Schäuble in Innsbruck, Austria. The local authorities watched his interrogation and basically said, "Dude, you're being way too intense about this. Case dismissed." Kramer was furious. He was convinced that the authorities didn't understand the threat, that they were being soft on witches. So he went home and wrote a book about it. The Malleus did something new. It combined elite theological ideas about demons and devil worship with common folk beliefs about harmful magic. Before the Malleus, those were separate categories. After, they were the same thing.
That village wise woman who sells healing herbs? According to Kramer, her power comes from a pact with Satan. And Kramer didn't just explain the problem, he provided a solution, a step-by-step manual for how to identify a witch, interrogate her, get a confession, and execute her. It even includes helpful tips, like if she doesn't confess under torture, that's proof the devil is protecting her, so torture her more. If she does confess, well, that's proof she's a witch. You literally cannot win. Now, here's what's insane. The Malleus was controversial when it came out. The theologians at the University of Cologne, who were Inquisitors themselves, said Kramer's demonology was theologically inconsistent and his procedures were unethical. The book should have died. But it didn't because of the printing press. The Malleus became a bestseller. It went through 29 editions between 1487 and 1669. It was translated into multiple languages. It spread everywhere. And suddenly, anyone who wanted to find witches had a manual, a guide, official-looking procedures, theological justification. The printing press, this incredible technology, this tool of the Renaissance and the Enlightenment, became a weapon of mass murder.
Here's how it played out, over and over and over, in thousands of villages across Europe. You're a farmer. You get in an argument with your neighbor, let's call her Anna, about where your property line is. It gets heated. Angry words are exchanged. 2 weeks later, your cow dies. You think back. Who have you pissed off recently? Anna. And Anna is, well, she's a little odd. She lives alone, she's kind of old, she knows a lot about herbs. You mention to someone at the tavern, you know, ever since I argued with Anna, my luck's been bad. That cow dying makes you wonder. Word spreads. It always does in a small village. Someone reports it to the authorities. The machinery starts. The authorities arrive. They have the Malleus. They know what to look for. They find Anna. They strip her naked, looking for the devil's mark, a mole, a birthmark, anything. They find one. They always find one. Everyone has moles. They interrogate her. She denies everything. They torture her. She confesses. Of course she confesses. Everyone confesses eventually. But here's where it gets worse. Under torture, they ask her, who else was at the Sabbath? Who else worships Satan with you? And Anna, in agony, desperately trying to make it stop, names names. Your other neighbor, the midwife, the woman who runs the inn. The chain reaction. Now you've got 4 accused witches who get tortured, who name more names. In some places, this chain reaction led to dozens of executions in a single town. In Würzburg, Germany, between 1629 and 1629, they burned 300 people. 300 people in 2 years in one town. The statistics. Between the 15th and 18th centuries, approximately 50,000 people were executed for witchcraft in Europe. 75 to 80% were women. But that's just executions. The number accused, tortured, Hundreds of thousands. In some regions, up to 10% of the adult female population was accused at some point. This wasn't an outbreak of madness. This wasn't ignorance. This was a system. Legal procedures, theological justification, mass-produced instruction manuals. Horror at scale. And that brings us to the most infamous version of this system, the Spanish Inquisition.
When most people hear Inquisition, they think torture chambers, religious fanaticism, the worst of the medieval church. And in the case of the Spanish Inquisition, they're not wrong. But here's what makes the Spanish Inquisition different and way more terrifying. It wasn't run by the church, it was run by the state. Quick context. For centuries, Christian kingdoms in Spain had been reconquering territory from Muslim states, the Reconquista. By 1478, Spain is full of converted former Muslims and Jews. Many converted voluntarily, many didn't. And there's growing paranoia that these converts are secretly still practicing their old religions, that they're fake Christians, crypto-Jews, crypto-Muslims. In 1478, Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand, who've just united Spain through their marriage, asked the Pope for a special inquisition to deal with this problem. They get it, but here's the key difference. The Spanish Inquisition answered to the crown, not the Pope. It was a tool of state power disguised as a religious institution.
The historian Helen Rawlings put it perfectly. It was responsible to the crown rather than the Pope and was used to consolidate state interests. This was one of the first true modern bureaucracies, efficient, organized, keeping meticulous records. The Inquisition had offices, it had a budget, it had career inquisitors who got salaries and pensions. It was the DMV if the DMV could torture and burn you. And it got out of hand immediately. The Pope who authorized it in 1478? By 1482, he's lodging a formal protest, saying the procedures are too brutal, there's no due process. It gets worse. In 1485, an inquisitor is murdered in Zaragoza. The response? The Spanish crown effectively annihilates the Jewish elite in the entire kingdom of Aragon. Then, in 1492, the same year Columbus sails to America, Ferdinand and Isabella issue an edict. All remaining Jews in Spain have 4 months. Convert to Christianity or leave. 200,000 Jews are expelled. Many die on the journey. Those who convert, now they're subject to the Inquisition, forever suspect, forever watched. Between 1478 and 1530, just the first 50 years, the Spanish Inquisition kills approximately 2,000 people. Another 15,000 are disciplined, which means torture, property confiscation, public humiliation, forced labor. Their methods were brutal. The strappado, you're hung by your wrists behind your back, then dropped, dislocating your shoulders. The toca, water torture. They pour water down your throat while you're tied down until you're drowning. The rack, they stretch you until your joints separate. And here's the thing, they kept records of all this, detailed records. That's how we know.
In the archives, you can read testimonies like this. The accused was given 3 turns of the rope. She screamed and said she would tell the truth. She said she had observed Jewish fast days twice. She was given 1 more turn. She said she had also lit candles on Friday nights. End quote. That's it. That's what got her tortured, lighting candles on Friday nights. After crypto-Jews, the Inquisition moved on to crypto-Muslims, then to Protestants when the Reformation hit, then to anyone accused of Judaizing or heresy or witchcraft or blasphemy. The Spanish Inquisition lasted until 1834. That's after the American Revolution,
after the French Revolution, after Napoleon, after the United States had been a country for almost 60 years. The last person burned by the Spanish Inquisition died in 1826, in the same decade that saw the first photograph and the first passenger railway. Let that absurdity sink in.
So, what's the point of all this? Why am I telling you about medieval heretics and witch burnings and the Spanish Inquisition? Because this isn't a story about the past. This is a story about a pattern. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Here's how it works. Step 1. A group gains the power to define truth, to define orthodoxy, to define what's acceptable belief or behavior. Step 2. Boundaries are drawn. Lines are established. You're either inside or outside, orthodox or heretic, us or them. Step 3. Mechanisms of enforcement are created, legal procedures, investigative bodies, punishment systems. Step 4. The machinery begins to feed itself. Each accusation leads to more accusations. Each confession implicates more people. And throughout all of this, the people operating the machinery believe they're doing the right thing. The Dominicans who arrived in that town in 1320, they genuinely believed they were saving souls. The men who wrote the Malleus, they thought they were protecting Christian civilization. The Spanish Inquisitors, they believed they were preserving the faith. You want to see this pattern today? It's everywhere. Social media pile-ons where one accusation leads to dozens more, where the accused can't defend themselves because the accusation itself is proof of guilt. Political movements that demand absolute ideological purity, where yesterday's ally becomes today's heretic for the slightest deviation. Institutions, universities, corporations, governments that develop elaborate procedures to investigate and punish wrongthink. The details change, the pattern doesn't. The lesson of the Inquisition isn't religion is bad or the medieval church was evil. The lesson is this: when human institutions gain the power to define truth and the authority to punish deviation, horror follows. Not because the people are evil, but because the system creates evil. Marguerite Porete died for writing a book that was later approved by the Pope. Jan Huss died for ideas that became mainstream 100 years later. 50,000 people died as witches for crimes that didn't exist. The people who killed them, they were following procedures. They were following the rules. They were doing their jobs. And that's what should terrify you, because if they could become monsters while believing they were heroes, what makes you so sure you couldn't?